Today we are going to be continuing in Galatians, and we're going to be in Galatians 6, 3 through 5, but we're going to be looking at a few verses beforehand. But today we're going to be talking about helping someone up who is down, and especially someone who's fallen into sin or even just done something that you didn't approve of, and just how we should react and how we should behave. And when I was thinking of helping someone up who is down, one of the first things that crossed my mind was I seen this thing once, and I don't know where I seen it. It must have been on like Funniest Home Videos or YouTube or something like that. And maybe some of you guys have seen this, because I think I've seen it pop up in a couple of places. But I think it was a soccer player. This tells you how vague I was. He was either soccer or football, but this guy got hit really hard, and he was down on the field. He wasn't moving. And these people came running out with the stretcher, and I don't know what their rush was. But they rushed out there, and they worked him up onto the stretcher, and the one guy goes to pick it up, and he gets a little bit ahead, and they rolled him off, and he dumped onto the ground. And they quick set it down, and they quick moved him on, and they were running off the field, and the guy in front stumbled, and they just went down in a big pile and just, poof, just dropped this guy who was not even able to move, And I think, maybe sometimes that's maybe a little closer to how we help someone up who's fallen. We maybe take a little bit of haste in helping someone up who's fallen down, and we're maybe not quite always as careful as we maybe ought to be when we're trying to help up someone who's down, and maybe our thoughts aren't always quite in the right place when we're trying to assist someone who's fallen. And I think especially when someone's fallen, we want to do it in humility. We want to be thinking of ourselves. We want to be thinking of the times that we've fallen and the things that we've messed up, and we want to be doing this in care. So as we look at the context of this chapter, just to get a little bit of an idea of how strong the context supports this, if we were to look at Galatians 5:12, Paul says, "I wish those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves." Now, this is not the attitude I'm looking for, okay? But he's like, I wish those who are telling you to be in this Old Testament Jewish circumcision religion would just take their knife of circumcision and slash themselves to ribbons and completely emasculate themselves. However, he's not talking about, he's like, whoever they are, he doesn't even know who they are. He just knows that they're trying to destroy the church. And he's like, I wish they would meet a tough ending. However, when he's talking about dealing with people and problems in the church, he gives us a very different way to view this. So in the next verse, he says in verse 13, he says, "You were called to freedom, brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh." But he says, through love, serve one another. He says, when it comes to you guys and you're working, he's like, first off, the very first thing I'm going to tell you entering into this new covenant of freedom is be a loving servant, to put yourself low and below other people. He's like, this is the very first thing I'm going to come out of the gate with to tell you. When you go into this, you be a humble servant. And it's about attitude, attitude, attitude. Then the very next verse, verse 14, "For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, to love your neighbor as yourself." He's like, it's all about this. Attitude, attitude, attitude. He's like, this is just like, he's like, I can't even tell you how much it comes down to this humble attitude, how much it comes down to putting them before you. Like, it is so important. Just when I'm telling you who and what to be, attitude is just first and foremost in all of it. And he says here in verse 15, he says, "But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you're not consumed." And he's like, listen, when you're dealing with problems with each other, if you go around, if you're biting each other's heads off, if you're just biting and devouring each other, he's like, the whole church is just going to be cannibalized. He's like, it's going to be one giant dumpster fire. He's like, you'll destroy everything. He's like, attitude, attitude, attitude. He's like, over and over, he's like, just watch it. You got a problem with each other? Let's not bite each other's heads off. Just again and again and again and again, watch it. Watch it. Your attitude, it's going to be so important. Watch how you are acting. Attitude, 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 over and over and over and over, he says it. And I'm going to spare you, okay? But I literally, coming into the end of this chapter, just the last quarter of this chapter, I counted 17 more times that he warns you to watch your attitude. He's like, don't slash out in anger, this greed and dissensions and all this stuff. He's like, attitude, like, watch it. Just don't let it happen. Do not. And I counted 17 more times that he says something to this effect. Like, when you're going forth in this Christian lifestyle that I'm sending you out into, watch that attitude. I mean, watch it. And he says it so many times. And then he ends off this chapter by saying this. He says, let us not become conceited, provoking one another and envying one another. He says, don't go getting a big head and going after everybody. Don't start thinking, wow, I'm pretty great. Maybe I should be cutting everybody else down and kicking them. He's like, attitude, attitude, attitude. Don't go thinking you're something and start attacking people. He's like, this is how the church is going to go down. Don't let it happen. It'll all be destroyed. Watch that attitude. Over and over and over he says it. So then coming into chapter 6 here, he says this. He says, brothers. And this is something I would say before I tell the kids, just everybody watch it when I'm gone, okay? I'd be like, kids, everybody come here, okay? He's like, brothers, all you guys. He's like, brothers, if anyone is caught in any kind of sin, you who are spiritual, restore them in a spirit of gentleness. He's like, guys, if something starts to go wrong in this place, if people start to get crazy, the people who are spiritual, meaning the people who are in self-control, loving, caring, gentle, this sort of thing, those people gently go and handle the problem, right? Attitude, attitude, attitude. If something starts to go down, the gentle people gently go and restore the person who has a problem. And then he says this. He says, keeping watch on yourselves, unless you too be tempted. He says, attitude, attitude, attitude. He's like, when you go to restore them, watch it. Like, how many times? This is like the umpteenth time he said it. Watch it. Don't you get dragged into it. It's like, how many times is he going to say, like, this whole church could just absolutely tear down in, like, literally an absolute dumpster fire. Like, everybody just go at it, boom, just done. He's like, attitude, attitude, attitude. Don't be tempted to get caught up in it. Watch it gently, carefully, handle the problem, and only send the people who are capable of gently handling a problem if you're going to go and address the problem. Make sure it's the people with the attitude. And that's really what I want to look at today is, do you have the kind of heart it takes to help someone up when they're down? Are you that person? Because that is what you're working to be in a church and as the family of God. You're looking to be the person with the attitude to help other people along. So then he says this, and this is the immediate context, the verse right before what we're going to look at. He says this. He says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And when I think of this, I think of like a soldier who's down. If you're going to bear someone's burdens, I think of like a soldier who's been shot in a field or something. And you're like, the enemy's coming. Get up. We got to get to the woods line. We got to get there. And it's like, you can't stay here. We got to go. And you're like, okay, if I have to, I'll carry you. If I have to, I'll pick you up and we'll go together. Like, he's like, if you're going to fulfill God's law, if you're going to be his people, if you're going to do what I want out of you, you're going to be like, come on, here, I'll carry you. Put some of your weight on me, and I'll carry you together. That's the attitude that's going to get us across that finish line, right? That's the attitude that he's looking for to get us there. He's like, it's all going to come down to this. Are you going to look at someone in this way? When they've fallen, when they're down, are you going to grab them and be like, no, a man down. We got to get them safety. We've got to get them there. Like, what sort of attitude are you going to help them up with? Like, what way are you going to view them, and how are you going to look at them when you're helping them up and when you're helping them along? And I think if your attitude is like, I seen this coming, I always knew it. They were, I told you, right? They're trash, right? Right? Like, how do you see them? Like, when they go down, what view did you take of them? Are you like, oh, they really hurt me in the past, and like, I would go and tell them what they done, Like, do you see them with love, and have you put yourself down below in order to carry them up, right? I got to watch it going off of my notes, but this, when I get too far off track, but this really reminds me, somebody told me once, I'm not a lifeguard, probably a lifeguard could tell me better. We have a lifeguard. But I was told once, if you ever help somebody who's drowning, go down underneath them and push them up, because if you don't know what you're doing, they'll just take you down, you know. They'll take you down, and like, I think the idea is to put yourself low and lift them up. You know, to bring them up, that you care about them and you're willing to put yourself down low enough to lift them up because you care from the heart. You're like, I care about this person who's fallen, and this is the way that you see them. So I think that, here in 2 Corinthians 2:4, we see an example of someone in the Corinthian church has really hurt a lot of people. They've done something that has really made everyone feel hurt and bad. And Paul says this. He says that he's talking about when he had to correct these people. And you do have to correct these people in sin. But he's talking about how he felt when he had to correct these people. And he says this. He says, "For I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish in many tears." And he says, "Not to hurt you, but so that you would know the great love that I have for you." And then he goes on to say, he's like, all of you could feel bad. All of you, and he says, including myself, he's like, we could all feel hurt about this. We could all feel like, oh man, they really hurt us. They made us feel bad. And we could correct them in a way that was like, you know what, you hurt me. And you made me feel bad. And he's like, do you know how I felt when I did the correcting? He's like, I was dying. He was like, I was in pain, and not because of me, but because I loved them. And he's like, I wanted to just bring them up and pull them up. And then he says this in verse 8, he says, so I beg you to affirm your love for them. He's like, I am begging you to show them that you love them. Why are you coming to them? Why are you telling them these things? Why? What is your goal in straightening them out? Is your goal in straightening them out so that you're like, you really hurt me, I'm just going to straighten you out? Or are you a spiritual person who goes to them in a spirit of gentleness and says, come on, I'll not leave you here. Come on, get up and let's go. Like, what sort of attitude do you have? Because I'm telling you, when it comes to the core of finishing off a book of the Bible, and you start getting to this is it, guys, I mean, this is important. This is not something that you just, oh yeah, you brush off. I'm telling you, this is like, he is laying it down here. This is important over and over. I mean, like, I don't know how many times. I kind of counted through them. There might be nearly 30 times he lays this out in various different ways. This is important in your attitude. So he says here in verse 3 of Galatians chapter 6, he says this. He says, if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. And maybe a translation of that would be like, if somebody thinks they're all that and a bag of chips, and they're not, they're dumb and they don't even know it. And if you are going to be corrected by someone, and somebody's going to tell you what you did wrong, boy, who do you want to tell you? Who do you want to be told by? Because I can tell you, you want no one to tell you. What is your first thought when somebody tells you, you sinned? What is your first thought? And who are you? Who are you to tell me? You think you're perfect or something? Can you imagine the disaster of someone who thinks they're all that and they're not? Do you want to be corrected by that person? So then the flip side is, who are you? Do you want to be known as that person? Because when there's somebody who's a goody two-shoes, who literally thinks they're all that, and they're literally the one, frankly, we know them, right? They're usually the people doing the correcting, right? You're like, what is your impression of who you think you are? Why are you always correcting people? What makes you the one who's always telling people, that's not really good, generally it comes right back to themselves. They're like, it really makes it hard on us, it makes it hard on us. They're not worried about you. They're worried about them. That's why they don't want you sinning. That's why they don't want you doing things that are wrong. So then he continues here in verse 4 and he says, but let each one examine himself. And then his reason to boast will not be because he's compared himself to someone else, but because of who he is. Because each person will have to bear his own burden. You know, we need to, before we shoulder someone else's burden, we better shoulder our own burden. Before we go and we say, compared to me, you're a sinner, we better look at ourselves and say, who am I? And what am I? You know, we need to look at ourselves, and I think anybody who truly examines themselves is going to be like, you know what? I've failed too. You know what? I've sinned as well. And I may not be there right now today, but we're going to be like, you know what? We need to come to that person. We need to be like, you know what? I'm a sinner who's fallen before, and someone came and helped me up just like I'm helping you right now. And you need to let them know. You need to let them know. You need to be like, listen, I'm someone who fell, and someone helped me back onto the road of the path of righteousness and right. Someone else lifted me up when I had fallen, and they helped me get back on the path. So now I'm here in humility. Somebody who's examined myself and said, I'm looking at myself not based on comparing myself to you, but I have taken a good look at myself, and I can tell you there's not many people who take a deep, long look at themselves and say, yeah, perfect history, perfect road behind me, right? They look at themselves and say, man, I've messed up big a lot of times. And I may be on the road right now. Maybe I may be on the road right now. But as I help you up, I'm going to be like, man down, brother who's fallen. And I'm going to be like, you know what, I care and I love, and I'm going to grab a hold of you, and I'm going to pull you towards what is right, because I care about what's right, not because of who I think I am, not because I think I'm all of that, not because I've become conceited, and now I'm going to just lash out at all of you guys, not because of who I think I am or what I deserve. I'm going to come to you in a spirit of gentleness, in a spirit of humility, to restore someone who's down. Like, that is so important, and I can't tell you today in closing, like, how strong the context of this chapter supports this. I mean, over and over and over and over, he says, in humility, in gentleness, as a servant, putting them first, restoring them in gentleness, caring about them, not getting a big head, not become conceited, not forgetting to look at yourself. Take a hold of them and pull them up to restoration. Grab a hold of them and bring them up to the place they need to be. And I think of this verse, this is one of the main verses that crosses my mind in Matthew 7:1. It says, judge not that you be not judged. And it says, for the measure in which you judge, you will be judged. And the measure in which you use judgment, it will be measured against you. And you know, I think, that verse scares me. I think if I am going to judge someone, I'm going to crawl to them. And I'm going to be like, woe, me a sinner is helping woe, you a sinner, right? I don't want any arrogance when I come to judge someone. I want to come to them and be like, I love you and I won't leave you here. I've been here, but I won't leave you here. And I'm going to tell you, you need to get up before the enemy closes in on you, and you need to get out of this open field and get back into right and righteousness where you are safe. And I'm going to be like, because I love you and because I care with like hurting, I'm like, sure, you know, there's a lot of people say, but you have to judge them, and that's true. You do have to judge them. But who is supposed to do it? And how are they supposed to do it? They're supposed to be like, who am I? And I will crawl to you and be like, guys, this is wrong. I've been here and it's wrong, but nobody should be here. Let's go together. Let's go. Let's get out of here. Let me grab you and pull you out of this place. And I'm not going to get on my big arrogant horse and tell you how bad you are. I'm going to be like, come on, let's go. Let's get out of this place. And I just think, you know, really what comes to my mind over and over in all of this is a pure heart. And I think maybe you don't know how that fits in, but I think of it over and over. Whether you're standing in the kitchen talking to someone and you just kind of day-to-day life and you tend to snap out or lash out or however you may be, or however you deal with people, you need to be looking from a pure heart and be like, man, who am I? I'm somebody who's sinned. And why do I want them restored? Do I care about them and love them? Am I full of any type of conceit or anything rotten inside? Or why did I say it? Let my motivations be pure and right. Let me be like, man down. I got to get you up. Help you get up because I care. I'm helping you get up because I care about you. And that is so important in all of this. And I hope you just have an opportunity to grasp how much the context of this weighs on that. Paul's like, don't let this church blow up into an absolute flaming garbage heap. Like it's that easy. Don't be tempted. Don't let it happen. Look at yourselves, then help each other to get to the goal, to cross the line. You're not competing. You're working together as a team, and you're not arrogant in it. It's so strong in the context of this. So let's close in a word of prayer this morning. Our God and Father, we just pray that you would just help us to have the right heart attitude, and when we see someone who's wronged us, who's hurt us, let us not become someone who lashes out at them as if we deserve better out of them, but help us to see them as someone who's fallen. Help us to with a spirit of gentleness to come and lift them up and pull on them. That we would first look to bear our own problems, that we would first look to shoulder what we need to shoulder, and then that we would turn and that we would be willing to carry some of their burden, that we would be willing to lift them up and pull them to cross that line, Lord, that we would be willing to care enough, to love enough, that it would hurt us to see someone who's down, hurt us to see someone who's not walking as they should, and help us to have the heart to do things the right way, to have the heart to care, and help us not to be people who are acting as non-spiritual people, who are living as people who think they're good when they're not. Lord, please help us to be the church and the people that you want us to be, and help us to understand just how important that is. And I pray this in your Son's name. Amen.